Hi boys and girls, it's Mrs. J. Thanks for joining me for math again today. So, like I told you in the other video, hopefully if you have these two math videos together and you haven't watched the other video first, go back and watch the first video first. The beginning point should have a fraction strip paper that looks like this. Watch this one first so you understand and get the gist of how equivalent fractions work, and do the worksheets for 5-7 before you come and you do the worksheets for 5-8. So as we go ahead and we do the worksheets for 5-8, you may be doing this with me the first time. You may be doing this on a piece of paper. You might just be watching it. You maybe already did these and now you're going to check your answers. Any way you want to get these done this week to help improve and move your math forward learning, however you feel comfortable with doing that, I'm good with that also. Okay, so fractions on a number line, finding equivalent fractions is very similar to fractions with the fraction bar, except now you just see the lines with the spaces. Sometimes people think that fractions on a number line are a little bit easier. Some people think that the fractions with the fraction bar with all the lines sometimes is a little too busy and it's a little more confusing. So I don't know, maybe you might be one of those people that prefers fractions on a number line, and we'll just practice and see how you do with it. So you can see here down the middle of the paper, they've drawn a dotted line right through the middle with the fractions that all match up with 1/2. This is like I told you, remember how we had our green piece of paper? And you can slide your paper or your straight edge or your ruler, whatever it is that you have, back and forth to see which lines match up, and it will tell you the equivalent fractions. So if we look at the fractions right here in the middle of our paper, we can see we have 1/2, 2/4, 3/6, and 4/8, and they all line up in exactly the same space. And if you take a look, our wholes, our fractions on a number line, the spaces are equal, so we know that those fractions are equal. Okay, now they tell you down here you can write what's called an equivalence chain, because since all of these fractions are equal to each other, they're equal to each other separately and all together. So this has 1/4 is equal to 2/4 is equal to 3/6, which is equal to 4/8. So that's what they mean by writing a chain. Okay. Now this says draw a vertical segment from 2/3 down to the number line for 1/6. So we want to go from 2/3 down to 6. So I'm going to use my straight edge for that, and I'm going to find 2/3, and they want us to draw a line down to the 1/6, which I just did. So vertical means up and down, and a segment, you know, that's a chunk of line that has a beginning and an end. What fraction is equivalent to 2/3? Well, if you take a look, now I went through my 2/3 with marker, but my fraction here is 4/6 because they're exactly lined up. And, we'll make a fancy 4 and a 6. 4/6 is done for you. So 2/3 is equal to, now if you want, you can use this line here for the middle of your answer. So 2/3 is equal to 4/6. You can either use that for your fraction line, or if you want to write 4/6 like you would on top of the line, you can do it either way. Okay? All right, so we're going to use the number lines and complete the equations or equivalence chain. Because that's what this means down here. So we must have lots of fractions equal to that one. So we need to find a fraction that's equal to 3/4. So I'm going to find 3/4. I have my ruler handy, so I'm just going to use my ruler. And I'll pull that down so you can see it. I'm going to line up 3/4, and I don't want to go over it because I want you to be able to see it. But if I look here, 3/4, and I go down, oh geez, I just wrote on my ruler. Oh my goodness. 6/8. So 3/4 and 6/8 take up the same amount of space on a number line, so they are equivalent. So 3/4 equals 6/8. and I wrote 6/8 at the bottom, okay? Let's look at 1/4, 1/4. So I'm gonna slide my straight edge over to 1/4, and I can see here, looking down, I have to go down to the eighths. I can see that 2/8 takes up the same amount of space. So they are equivalent. 1/4 equals 2/8. 1/4 equals 2/8. 1/3. So now I have to find 1/3. I'm going to take my straight edge right next to 1/3. And I'm going to look up or down. In this case, I'm going to go down. And I'm going to see that that matches up and is partners with 2/6. So 1/3 equals 2/6. Those fractions are equivalent. 1/3 and 2/6. To keep moving my paper up and down here. 1/3 and 2/6. All right, so now we're going to do an equivalence chain. These are fun. So the fraction I want is 2/2 or 2/2. And I know that whenever I have a numerator and a denominator that are the same, I'm talking about the entire object. So I know that these are all going to equal 1. So let's look over here and let's see what they are. So if I look down, and I make sure you can see all those, I see 3/3, 4/4, 6/6, and 8/8. 3/3, 4/4, 6/6, and 8/8. So let's write those on our paper. 3/3, 4/4, 6/6, and 8/8. And all of those fractions would equal 1. Okay, so that's how you would complete 5/8 reteach. So no matter if you did that on your own, or then you checked your answers with me, or you did it with me, I hope you're getting the hang of how to find fractions either on a number line or fractions on a fraction bar, and use a straight edge to slide it back and forth to find which fractions take up the same amount of space as other fractions, and that makes them equivalent. So let's look now at 5/8 practice, and this is where you're going to do this on your own. Now, I'm going to keep this paper handy because I'm basically going to keep the completed fraction lines handy so that I can recreate them here by myself. Okay? So I know this says complete each number line. Show all fractions including each fraction for 1. So we have to go all the way to the end of the fraction line. So let's look at the first one. So my first fraction line is divided into half, and I need to show the fraction for 1. So I would have to write 2/2. So now my half fraction line is done. I'm going to go to thirds. Now, the thirds. So I see 1/3 to the left, and I see 2/3 to the right, and then 3/3. So you want to try and make your fractions on your number line as close as the ones that they had. Now I think it's kind of a good idea. They drew a dotted line down the middle. I'm actually going to take a pencil, and I'm going to do that down the middle because I think if I have a line down the center, that will give me a good reference point for where the middle of my fraction should be. And it might help me go a little to the left or a little to the right and make my sections of my fractions a little bit more equal and balanced. So let's go back to 1/3. Oh, that's definitely going to be easier. So 1/3 is a little to the left. 2/3 needs to be a little to the right, and we're going to do the best we can. 2/3, and we have to finish off our fraction with 3/3. Okay. Now we're going to go to fourths. I'm trying to see if I can get how many I can get these to fit. I think if I keep sliding the paper up, you'll be able to see. All right, so I have 1/4. I know 2/4 is going to be in the middle. I will have 3/4 and 4/4. So 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4. And I can see on my first worksheet, 1/2 is equivalent to 2/4 right in the center, and that's what I have for my worksheet, 1/2 and 2/4. So I'm glad I went and I did that pencil line. I think that's going to come in handy. Okay, so the next one that we have to do is 6ths. So let's see, I may have to, I'm going to fold my paper over so that you can see the 6th, and then I'll unfold it. Okay, so 6 is down here a little bit below. So I'm going to start with 3/6 in the middle because I know that that's half, and I have to have 6/6 at the end. So I have 1/6, 2/6, 3/6, 4/6, 5/6, 6/6. Okay, as you get a little more fractions on a number line, sometimes they get a little trickier. And now we're going to do 8ths. So I have 4/8 in the middle. And I know I have to have 8/8 at the end. And so now I'm going to jump on my number line. So I have 1/8. And then I'll have 2/8 and 3/8. I'm going to kind of make the dash marks first. 4/8, 5/8, 6/8, 7/8, 8/8. The best I could. 2/8, 3/8, 4/8, 5/8, 6/8, 7/8. Okay, now we did the best we could with that. I know I did, and I'm sure you probably did too. And drawing fractions on a number line and making them all exactly where they're supposed to be so that they line up so that they're equivalent is a really hard thing to do. So as we're doing this worksheet, you might want to keep the one that's already pre-printed handy so that we can go back and double check our work to make sure that it's right. All right, so let's take a look at the bottom. It says write, let's see, use your number lines, write an equivalence chain. Oh, that's fun. So we're going to write connecting fractions in order. So with fractions that equal 4/4. Well, if I find 4/4, and I'm going to use my straight edge, that's all of my fractions at the end of my number line that equal 1. So all of these fractions over here are equal to 4/4. So I can write 4/4 is equal to 2/2, 3/3, 6/6, and 8/8. Okay, so those are all of my fractions in a row. Hopefully you had those, or if you didn't, you just did them with me. All right. An equivalence chain for fractions that are equal to 4/6. Well, if I slide my ruler over, I see 4/6 and 2/3. And I'm pretty sure that that's right because I think we did that one. Oh, yep, 4/6 and 2/3. We did that on our first worksheet. So my number line wasn't too bad. Hopefully yours wasn't either. So 4/6 is equal to 2/3. And then we have fractions that equal 1/4. So if I slide my ruler over to 1/4, it looks pretty close, like I have 2/8. And if I check on my number line that was done first, 1/4 lines up with 2/8. So we did great on that one. 1/4 equals 2/8. 1/4 equals 2/8. Okay, so hopefully, like I said, whether you did those with me or you went ahead and you did them first and now you're checking your answers, or maybe you're going to watch the video and then you're going to go ahead and do the worksheets now that you understand and you know how to do it, I'm okay with that. So anyway, fractions on a number line or fractions using fraction bars to show equivalent fractions. Whichever system you like better. Sometimes kids prefer the fraction strips. They think it's a little easier visually to see the big chunks of the fractions. Sometimes kids like fractions on a number line better because they think it's a little bit simpler. Whichever system you like better, that's okay, as long as you understand that equivalent fractions are fractions that are equal and that they take up the same amount of space in objects that are equal. All right, boys and girls, thanks for joining me today for Sideways Math. I think that's what we're going to start calling math from now on, Sideways Math, when we have worksheets. And I hope you had success with these. And I'll be back Wednesday for a lesson for you in review on perimeter and area. So I'll see you Wednesday for more Sideways Math. Bye.